Good afternoon, sir.
Sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon. Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, all.
Oh no.
Now we'll come to the passage part in UNCLOS. What is innocent passage? What is passage? So passage means navigation through territorial sea for the purpose of traversing that sea without entering the internal waters. So you're not entering the internal waters or calling to the anchorage or roadstead or port facility outside internal waters. That means you're not entering into those areas. So you're proceeding from internal waters or a call at such port, roadstead or port facility. So that means you're not going to the innocent passages, as I said, that you are traversing through the territorial waters, but not proceeding to the anchorage or to the port. So what is now innocent passage? So it's a concept in the law of sea that allows for a vessel to pass through the territorial waters of another states, but with certain restrictions. So what are the rights of innocent passage? So suppose you have the countries in landlocked. So they have a right of innocent passage through the territorial sea. So ships of all states, whether coastal or landlocked. Landlocked means it doesn't have any sea around. Example, Afghanistan, Nepal. No, it doesn't have any sea around. So it will not have any territorial waters around it. So these countries can enjoy the right to innocent passage through the territorial sea of that other country. Now, what are the obligations during innocent passage? So passage of a foreign ship shall be considered to be prejudicial to the peace. Prejudicial to the peace means against the peace or conflicting with the peace. So good order or security of the coastal state, if the territorial sea it engages, should not create these kind of problems. So activities will not create these kind of problems. That it should not be any threat or use of force against the sovereignty, territorial integrity, or political independence of that coastal state, or in any manner violate the principles of international law as per Charter of United Nations. That means you're not going to enter into a territorial water to unstabilize that country. You're not doing those activities. Second, any exercise or practice with weapons of any kind. A naval vessel entering there and start practicing firing there. Not allowed. Naval vessels cannot enter territorial waters. Or your vessel enters into territorial waters, start firing there. Not allowed. C. Any act at collecting information to the prejudice of the defense or security of the state. So you're not going to enter the territorial waters of another country and start doing spying. You can't do that. So it is not allowed. That is not innocent passage. Number 4. Any act of propaganda aimed at affecting the defense or security of coastal states. Now you enter that territorial waters and start propaganda through your channels, FM channels and all, or TV channels, which you block and start presenting your propaganda on TV or radio. So that is not allowed. E. Launching, landing or taking on board any aircraft. So if you bring an aircraft carrier there to launch aircraft there, that is not allowed. So aircraft carrier also is not allowed there in the territorial waters. F. Launching, landing or taking in on board any military device. G. Loading or unloading of any commodity, currency or person. contrary to the customs, fiscal, immigration, or sanitary laws. So you're not loading any currency, you're not doing hawala operations there in the territorial waters, nor are you going to load any commodity there. And you don't enter there and start loading any commodity mid-sea. You can't do. Neither you're picking up any migrants or immigrants there. That is not allowed. H. Any act of willful or serious pollution which is not as per this convention. You're polluting the sea, you're doing underwater discharges or over the water discharge in that area in the territorial waters, not allowed. That was H. Then is I, any fishing activity. So you can't do any fishing activity inside the territorial waters. J, in your innocent passage, you're not carrying out research or survey activities with your vessel. So that is also not allowed. K, any act aimed at interfering with the system of communication or facility or installation of coastal state. You are entering into the territorial waters and putting jammers there. So your services of your Airtel or maybe whichever the companies are or GeoNet are all affected. That you can't do. L is any activity not having direct bearing on passage. So you're not doing a innocent passage, any activity which is not linked with innocent passage. You can't do that. Now, are the charges levied on ships passing to territorials your TS? So, if you're passing through the territorial sea, you don't have any, because you're doing innocent passage, you don't have to give any money to that country. Charges may be levied upon foreign ship passing through the territorial sea as a payment only for specific charges rendered to the ship. So these charges shall be levied without discrimination. So any favor you're doing to that country of allowing there to pass, or you giving water or some other food products during innocent passage, so there that country can charge. Suppose you're finished with water and doing innocent passage, so you can call the coastal state, ask for water supply, they'll provide and they'll charge you for that. So those charges will be for the services provided. Otherwise, passing of innocent passage, no charge has to be given. Now, what is legal status of roadstead? Roadstead means anchorage. So these can be used for loading. You use in Indonesia, coal is loaded at anchorage, or unloading, anchoring of ships, which would otherwise be situated wholly or partly outside the outer limit of territorial sea, are included in territorial sea. Because if you're doing loading, unloading, they'll be part of territorial sea. Now, what are the obligations of nuclear powered vessels or ships carrying DG goods or noxious substances? So, foreign nuclear powered ships and ships carrying nuclear or other inherently dangerous substances or noxious substances shall, when exercising the right of innocent passage through the territorial sea, carry documents and observe special precautionary measures established for the ships by international agreement. So you don't have to discharge anything out. You should have the valid documents which the coastal country can ask you for. Now, suppose you have any criminal activity, or maybe somebody has knifed a person on board a ship when you're doing innocent passage. So what happens? So criminal jurisdiction of the coastal state should not be exercised on board a foreign ship passing through the territorial sea to arrest any person or to conduct any investigation in connection with any crime committed on board the ship during the passage, save only in following cases. So as I said, the third officer has knifed the cadet and you're doing innocent passage. So will the coastal state laws be there or not? What are the conditions? If the consequences of the crime extend to the coastal state. Now, if that has got a direct bearing on the coastal state, then coastal laws will be implicated. Number two, if the crime is of a kind to disturb the peace of a country or good order of territorial sea. So if they suppose a crime is of maybe declaring that on propaganda that Hinduism is bad or whatever against the peace of the country. So that will not be allowed. If the assistance, then the coastal laws will be allowed. Otherwise, the flag state laws will be there. If the assistance of local authorities has to be requested by master of ship or diplomatic agent or consular office of the state. Now, if the master is not reporting to the coastal state, then the laws of the flag state will continue. But suppose the master makes a request to the local authorities for assistance because of this kind of knifing incident, or he'll ask for the diplomatic agent or consular office, then the person will be arrested who has done the knifing as per coastal state laws, and that will continue in the court case will be in the coastal country only. If such measures are necessary for suppression of illicit traffic in narcotic drugs or psychotropic substances. Like I think 2 or 3 days back, it had come that Sri Lankan boat was seized and it had about 340, whatever, 34 grams or 340 kg of heroin. I think 34 kg of heroin, not 340. That was valued almost about 300 crores. So illicit drugs are there, then the coastal state laws will apply.
Sir, a MSC ship also got arrested in America for the same.
So MSC ship is carrying any drugs and it's within the territorial sea of that country. If it's outside the territorial waters, then the flag state rules will apply. Otherwise, it will be the coastal state. So if it was in the territorial waters and the Coast Guard has arrested it, then the US laws will apply. ये होता है क्यूबा और ये सारे कंट्री, कोलंबिया से लोग आते हैं, नॉट क्यूबा, कोलंबिया से जो शिप्स आती हैं, they are all engaged in trafficking of drugs. Whether you like it or not, whether master likes it or not, उसके शिप पे ड्रग होगा, नहीं तो मास्टर को उड़ा देंगे वो मास्टर को पोर्ट में ही उड़ा देंगे if he doesn't agree to it. If you are going to Colombia and then coming out, कहीं ना कहीं आपके शिप पे ड्रग है. Now international water क्या है? Outside your territorial waters is international waters. और high sea क्या है? Outside continental shelf high sea. तो इंटरनेशनल वाटर क्या होता है कि इंटरनेशनल वाटर है कि वहां इंटरनेशनल वाटर में फ्लैग स्टेट के रूल चलते हैं. जैसे अगर आपका कोलिजन हो गया विद इन टेरिटोरियल वाटर्स, तो कोलिजन हो गया टेरिटोरियल वाटर्स में, देन both the ships will be tried as per the law of that coastal country. But अगर suppose इंडिया के कोस्ट से 25 माइल दूर कोलिजन हुआ, फिर इंडिया is not going to interfere. That will be done in the courts of the flag state. So any part of sea beyond 12 nautical miles from the country is the international waters, and in that area law of the flag state is applicable on the ship.
सर अगर दोनों शिप का फ्लैग स्टेट अलग हुआ तो
क्या चीज?
दोनों दो शिप कोलाइड हुए और दोनों का फ्लैग स्टेट अलग अलग है.
हाँ, तो फिर म्यूचुअली डिसाइड होंगे किसके फ्लैग स्टेट में होगा ना, वो फिर म्यूचुअल एग्रीमेंट होगा कि किसके फ्लैग स्टेट में हो, किसकी कंट्री में होगा. सपोज एक पाकिस्तान का है और एक यूएस का है, दोनों कोलाइड कर गए आउटसाइड इंडियन वाटर, तो ऑब्वियसली वो यूएस में ही होगा, पाकिस्तान में तो कोई कराएगा ही नहीं, क्योंकि यूएस पावरफुल है, तो वो बोल देगा बेटा हमारे एरिया में करोगे. तुम्हारे कोर्ट में तो हम जाएंगे नहीं. So that will be tried maybe in US court then, because अगर वो powerful country है वो accordingly अपने एरिया में करवाएगा, है ना. So that is depending on which country. And suppose एक country था श्रीलंका का और एक country है suppose UK, दोनों के ships collide कर गए, तो UK वाला powerful है, UK बोलेगा हमारी country में होगा, तुम्हारी country में नहीं होगा. So depending on which country is stronger, otherwise mutual agreement will be done कि किस country के court में this case will be filed.
Okay, sir.
Now, the coastal states are empowered to enforce national standards and anti-pollution measures within their territorial sea, and every coastal state is guaranteed jurisdiction for protection of its EEZ. अब ये EEZ का इशू आया था कि US की नेवल फ्रिगेट निकली थी from the EEZ without informing US Indian authorities. तो ये इंडियन गवर्नमेंट ने ऑब्जेक्ट किया. बाद में यूएस वालों ने कहा ये तो हम तो नॉर्मल करते हैं, हम तो नहीं बताएंगे. तो इंडियन गवर्नमेंट दब गई ना उससे. नो, एज पर यूएन कन्वेंशन और UNCLOS, anybody entering any naval vessel entering or any territorial water or EEZ इन एरियाज में अगर वो एंटर करती है तो उसमें दे हैव टू इन्फॉर्म द कोस्टल स्टेट. लेकिन वो अमेरिका था तो अमेरिका ने अपना दबाव डाल दिया इंडिया पे, बोलता हम तो बताएंगे नहीं और हम तो करेंगे ऐसा ही. तो इंडिया ने कुछ बोला ही नहीं. तो इट इज ऑल डिपेंडिंग ऑन किसका पावर ज्यादा है, पल रहा है किसका भारी है. चाइना घुस जाता है लोगों के टेरिटोरियल वाटर्स में, उन लोग हल्ला करते रहते हैं, वो उसको परवाह ही नहीं है क्योंकि चाइना ज्यादा पावरफुल है. So states shall take individually or jointly any appropriate or all measures consistent with this convention that are necessary to prevent, reduce, and control pollution of marine environment from its any source, using this purpose the best practical means at their disposal, and accordingly harmonize the policies in this connection. तो अपना पूरा use करेंगे so that pollution is controlled in the marine environment. So states shall take all measures necessary to ensure that activities under the jurisdiction or control are so conducted as not to cause damage by pollution to other states and their environment, and the pollution arising from the incidents or activities under their jurisdiction or control does not spread beyond the seas. अब जैसे एग्जाम्पल आया था, वो जापान ने कहा कि हमारा फुकुशिमा कौन सा था न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर, उसका जो डिस्चार्ज हुआ तो उसको उन्होंने कंट्रोल किया था ड्यूरिंग द लास्ट सुनामी. अब उसमें रेडिएशन है, रेडियो एक्टिव सब्सटेंस. उन्होंने कहा हम पानी में रिलीज करेंगे, तो आसपास के सारे कंट्रीज ने हल्ला कर दिया, कहता नहीं नहीं आप ये रेडियो एक्टिव सब्सटेंस वहां रिलीज नहीं करोगे. सो स्टेट शुड इंश्योर दैट आप इस टाइप का काम ना करो. सो द मेजर शुड बी एज पर द UNCLOS to deal with all source of pollution, and they will also see that the release of toxic, harmful or noxious substances which are persistent from land-based sources from and through atmosphere or by dumping. एक लंदन डंपिंग क्लॉज है, बाद में हम कराएंगे आपका. उसमें वो लंदन डंपिंग कन्वेंशन था कि लैंड बेस्ड जो पोल्यूशन है इनटू सी, उसमें वो अलग अलग डिविजन्स बनाया उन्होंने. तो उसको हम डिस्कस करेंगे इन लंदन डंपिंग क्लॉज बाद में. सो उसमें क्या है कि आपके जो फैक्ट्री से डंप कर रहे हो सी में, वो कितना कितना एरिया में अलाउड है, कितने में नहीं आ रहा, दैट इज लंदन डंपिंग क्लॉज. इंडिया इज नॉट पार्टी टू इट. इंडिया ने कहा हम समुद्र में डंप करेंगे, तो इंडिया ने साइन नहीं किया. Now, pollution from vessels in particular is for preventing accidents and dealing with emergencies, ensuring safety operations at sea, preventing international and intentional and unintentional discharges, regulating the design, construction, equipment, operation and manning of vessels. ये सब हम मारपोल में बाद में करेंगे. अब इंस्टॉलेशंस हैं, जैसे ऑयल रिग है, या जो डिवाइसेस यूज करते हैं एक्सप्लोरेशन में ऑफ नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज इन सी बेड एंड सबसॉइल, तो उसमें वो एक्सीडेंट्स ना करेंगे, ना ही तो वो पोल्यूशन करेंगे, एंड दे शुड हैव प्रोसीजर्स फॉर डीलिंग विद इमरजेंसीज. So pollution from other installations and devices operating in the marine environment to prevent accidents and dealing with emergencies, ensure the safety of operation at sea, regulating the design, construction, equipment, operation and manning of these installations. Plus, जब आप prevent कर रहे हो, reduce कर रहे हो, control pollution of marine environment, you will not try to interfere with your activities of another country. वो नहीं कि आप जानबूझ के दूसरी कंट्री की एक्टिविटीज में इंटरफेयर करो फॉर प्रिवेंटिंग पोल्यूशन एंड ऑल, वो आप में अलाउड नहीं है. सो दैट वाज UNCLOS. और UNCLOS का देखता हूँ कोई मूवी है तो आपको मूवी दिखाएं. UNCLOS में बेसिकली डेफिनेशंस आते हैं. दैट इज टेरिटोरियल सी, देन आपका EEZ, और देन कॉन्टिनेंटल शेल्फ है, ये सारी डेफिनेशंस आते हैं. तो डेफिनेशन के टाइम आपको डेफिनेशन लिखना है और उसका डायग्राम बनाना है, और फिर उसमें कहाँ कहाँ ये यूज होता है, किसने साइन किया, डोलोस को अप्लाई करना है कि नहीं करना, वो सारा आपको लिखना है.
Canada's continental shelf is the shallow continuation of our landmass, ending far offshore where it transitions to the deep ocean floor. In Canada's Atlantic and Arctic Oceans, the outer limit of this shelf lies beyond the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, or EEZ, giving Canada an extended continental shelf. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, is an international treaty that sets out the legal framework for ocean activities and boundaries. UNCLOS confirms that coastal states have sovereign rights over the seabed and subsoil beyond their 200 nautical mile EEZ on the extended continental shelf as a natural continuation of their land territory. UNCLOS sets out a scientific definition of this area and a procedure to define and obtain international recognition of its outer limits. In 2003, the Government of Canada set out to collect the scientific evidence needed to define our extended continental shelf. But how do we measure and define land that is hidden deep underwater or ice? Bathymetric surveys use multi-beam sonar to create detailed 3D images and help us to measure the water depth and shape of the seafloor. This information is combined with scientific data about the physical characteristics of the seabed and subsea floor, gathered through geophysical and geological studies. All of the data is analyzed to determine the precise outer limit of Canada's extended continental shelf and provides the scientific evidence needed for Canada's submission under UNCLOS. Due to the number of countries that have made submissions, it will take several years before the experts at the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf are able to examine Canada's submissions. At the end of this process, the map of Canada could look very different than it does today. Recognition of Canada's last international boundaries will
Curiosity Stream investigates the rituals and cosmic symbols behind the world's most notorious secret societies.
In October 2015, Russian ships and submarines operated near undersea data cables, sparking fears that Russia may intentionally cut or wiretap the world's communication lines. Data cables are protected by international law, but what happens out on the high seas is a legally complicated jurisdiction. So we wanted to know, what are international waters and who exactly is in charge? Well, simply put, international waters are bodies of water that are outside a country's territorial waters, which extend 12 nautical miles from its coast. Within territorial waters, nations have full sovereignty, both above and below the surface. There is also an exclusive economic zone that extends 200 nautical miles out from the shore. But the EEZ only applies sovereign rights to what lies below the surface, like oil or minerals. After 12 miles, anyone can sail through a country's exclusive economic zone, but they can't drill for oil or fish. In fact, the freedom to navigate international waters is one of several freedoms guaranteed by the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea. All countries are allowed to fly over, lay cables, build islands, fish, and perform scientific research in international waters. Of course, that's not to say that you can do anything in international waters. First and foremost, whatever is being done on the high seas falls under the jurisdiction of the country the ship is registered in. But what if the country in question is unable or refuses to prosecute criminal activity, such as Somalian piracy? Well, that's when the concept of universal jurisdiction applies. Universal jurisdiction allows for any country to prosecute a criminal regardless of their nationality or where the crime was committed. Although usually this concept is used for crimes against humanity, like genocide, it's useful in international waters because otherwise nobody could claim jurisdiction. Recent efforts against Somalian piracy have been primarily led by the United States, but also involve China, Russia, France, and the UK, as well as the EU and NATO. In fact, this policing of international waters marks the first time the UN Security Council has worked on the same side since World War II. But what counts as international waters isn't always clear-cut. The nautical areas surrounding the Arctic as well as Antarctica are disputed, as multiple countries have claimed sovereignty over the land itself. Perhaps the most tense conflict is in the South China Sea. China lays claim to a number of islands, and by proxy also polices the surrounding waters. But neighboring states like Taiwan, Vietnam, and the Philippines say that China's claims overlap their own territory. Meanwhile, international countries, like the United States, maintain that a large portion of the South China Sea constitutes international waters. The US has even sent ships into what China claims as its own territory. This dispute is considered one of the most volatile in the Asian region. International waters are incredibly important for trade and communication, and are generally protected against unlawful activity. Although it may seem like you can just take a boat 12 miles off the coast and do whatever you want, that's far from the case. Historically, countries have claimed dominion over all the world's oceans. But today, the high seas are free for all. Despite how much water there is in the world, it's actually a fiercely fought over resource. To learn about which countries are fighting over water, check out this video.
Nearly all human activity, including commerce, transportation, sanitation, migration patterns, and survival, are intrinsically linked to water. Yet nearly 800 million people, or 11% of the global population, lacks access to clean drinking water.
Thanks for watching Test Tube News. Make sure to like and subscribe for new videos every day.
The new Vostro 145402 available on dell.co.in/work.
For centuries, mankind treated the earth and its resources as if they would never run out, and poured waste products away as though they would simply be absorbed and taken care of by nature. Today, all that is changing. Today, we understand that the planet's resources are limited and that the environment can be damaged forever unless we give it our care and attention. The sea is one of our most precious environmental resources. It covers around 70% of our planet's surface and supports global society in so many different ways. The world's oceans provide raw materials, energy, food, employment, a place to live, a place to relax, and the means to transport about 90% of global trade. But the sea needs protection, and in some areas that need is particularly great. Because of their ecological, socio-economic, or scientific significance, some sea areas that are vulnerable to damage from international maritime activities require special protection. IMO, the International Maritime Organization, has established a mechanism by which these so-called particularly sensitive sea areas, PSSAs, can be identified and formally designated, together with special protective measures that ships have to follow. So far, 14 PSSAs have been identified and designated. They include some of the world's best known and most iconic maritime locations, such as the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia, the seas surrounding the Florida Keys, and the Galapagos Islands. In each case, special protective measures have also been approved and adopted, often involving the compulsory routing of ships to avoid altogether these uniquely vulnerable and valuable areas.
IMO's PSSA program is a tremendously valuable tool to help protect the environment, and it reflects just how important this aspect of the organization's mandate has become. There is no other global mechanism that brings together so many different aspects about international shipping, safety, and environmental protection. It allows all stakeholders to have a say to identify the best solution for the environment and for the shipping industry. And in the future, we expect other locations to be put forward for consideration as PSSAs, thus extending still further the network of areas that enjoy the special level of environmental protection.
Mankind must continue to develop, but what we now understand is that our development in the future must take full account of finite and diminishing resources and a fragile environment. In short, our development must be sustainable. IMO's program to protect particularly sensitive sea areas is an essential element of sustainable development for a better planet and a brighter future.
So you've seen that video of PSSA. So these areas are particularly sensitive sea areas. Now, these are not MARPOL areas, or these are not special MARPOL areas, but these are basically areas which are recognized for ecological or socio-economic or scientific reasons. You're trying to protect it because these are sensitive to your various pollution or maybe marine traffic and all. So they have to be controlled or given special protection. So because these are very sensitive to damage by international maritime activities. So that's why these have been designated by IMO as PSSA. So the criteria for identification of these areas and for designation of special areas, they can be same like Baltic Sea. Baltic Sea is in most of the Marpol areas. So your special area can be PSSA or a PSSA can be special area. It's not that they are totally different. They can be part of each other. Both are governed by Marpol. So in many cases, particularly sensitive area may be identified within a special area or a special area can be identified within a PSSA. So these particularly sensitive sea areas, they are in this guidelines for revised guidelines for identification and designation of particularly sensitive sea areas. In this book, this is given. Now, as we have said, there are 14. In this, you've got only 12, but you have got 14 because Philippines also one has come up, and the Great Barrier Reef is there, particularly sensitive area. Florida Keys is in Florida here. It's for tourism. Galapagos Island there in Ecuador is basically where Charles Darwin theory of relativity is there. So your creatures are totally different in Galapagos Islands. They get disturbed by marine fishery, marine and movement. So they have to be rerouted. Baltic Sea is in your PSSA as well as Marpol. Canary Islands is there. So many areas are basically in this PSSA. Now these guidelines can be for ecological criteria. That is when the ecosystem there is very unique or very diverse. So marine or natural activity, natural events or human activities can degrade those areas. So there they have to be protected. Second is social, cultural and economic criteria. Now if these areas are for recreation or tourism like in Florida Keys where your surfing is taking place. So a lot of tourists are coming. So if that area is affected, then the tourism will not come there, or tourists are not going to come there. So they have to protect that area, so because that's an economic criteria. Now for scientific and educational criteria, we have this Galapagos Islands, where the scientific research is going around from Charles Darwin's time. Now the tortoise out there will be more than 350 kg big. Similarly, the creatures out there are totally different from your normal creatures. So the biological research of or historical value when the area has, that has to be protected. So when an area is approved as a particularly sensitive sea area, you have to have specific measures to control the maritime activities in that area. So that there can be routing measures that you have to take a roundabout or you have to avoid that area, or strict application of MARPOL discharge and equipment requirement like for your tankers, and then installation of VTS there so they can direct the traffic around it. Those are the special routing measures there. So PSSA area needs a special protection through action by IMO because it has got recognized ecological, socio-economic or scientific attributes which can be damaged by international shipping. So for making an area as particularly sensitive sea area, you have to apply the proposal that this area has to have protective measures, and what measures will you do to prevent, reduce or eliminate the threat or identified vulnerability or weaknesses. So what are your measures to improve that you have to give when you apply. So the associated protective measures for PSSA are limited to actions which have to be approved and adopted by IMO. Like you have to have a routing system in that area, or you have to make that area to avoid that area. So what are the routing measures for avoiding or routing around that area, which can be, or you can first mark it as avoided, or an area within defined limits in which your navigation is hazardous, or when it is exceptionally important to avoid casualties, which should be avoided by vessels or all vessels, or which class of vessels should avoid coming near that area. So the IMO publication ships routing included general provisions of ship routing, which was adopted by IMO in 1973, then amended, and then you standardize the design, development, and charted presentation, and the use of routing measures adopted by IMO. So I've just given a few examples here. You've got almost 14 there. So you have Great Barrier Reef, Australia. This was designated in 1990. Sabana Camagüey Archipelago in Cuba was 1997. Malpelo Island, Colombia was 2002. Sea around Florida Keys, United States, 2002. So let's see if we can see a routing measures done around PSSA, that kind of video if we can do. Let's see if we can see that.
The Coral Sea is a remote ocean ecosystem located to the northeast of Australia. The region is considered one of the most distinctive and undisturbed natural systems in the world. It is recognised for its unique physical, ecological and heritage values and provides refuge for a wide range of threatened, migratory and commercially valuable species. The environmental significance of the Coral Sea lies in its diverse array of sandy keys and islets, deep sea plains and canyons, seamounts and coral reefs. The Coral Sea is also home to the Great Barrier Reef, which, at over 2,300 kilometres long, is the largest coral reef ecosystem on the planet and was designated a World Heritage Area in 1981. In 1990, after a submission by the Australian Government, the International Maritime Organisation declared the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park the world's first particularly sensitive sea area. This area was then extended in 2005 to create the Great Barrier Reef and Torres Strait Particularly Sensitive Sea Area. Designation as a particularly sensitive sea area helps to protect seas where significant ecological, socio-economic or scientific features made vulnerable to damage by international shipping. The Great Barrier Reef and Torres Strait region has an impressive array of protective measures that allow the safe and efficient operation of international shipping. These measures include a comprehensive network of aids to navigation, a coastal vessel traffic service supported by a mandatory ship reporting system, a dedicated emergency towage vessel, ship routing measures, and a regime of designated shipping areas. Additionally, there are International Maritime Organisation adopted associated protective measures in place within the particularly sensitive sea area. In order to ensure that the appropriate level of protection is in place to protect this vulnerable region, the Australian Government continues to monitor shipping volumes to identify potential hazards and areas in need of additional protection. Over time, as the Australian economy has grown, shipping in the Coral Sea has increased. Like the Great Barrier Reef, the southwest Coral Sea contains areas that can be challenging to navigate, with narrow channels and shallow waters around the numerous reefs, keys and islands lying close to shipping lanes. To address this, Australia has proposed to extend the Great Barrier Reef and Torres Strait particularly sensitive sea area to the southwest portion of the Coral Sea, as there are a number of shipping hazards not covered by the current arrangements. The new area will cover approximately 564,000 square kilometres and represents approximately 12% of the entire Coral Sea. This area lies within Australia's exclusive economic zone and the Coral Sea Commonwealth Marine Reserve, an area of approximately 972,000 square kilometres, protected by the Australian Government under national environmental legislation. The proposed extension covers the waters of the reserve, in which the risk of impacts from shipping activities is highest. The Coral Sea contains critical habitat for a rich diversity of species, including some of the world's most unique and significant marine creatures, like the green turtle, humphead Maori wrasse, and the nautilus. 341 species found in the Coral Sea have been listed for conservation, and many of these species are listed as threatened or migratory, or both. Importantly, while more than half of these species show declining population trends worldwide, many are still found at healthy levels in the Coral Sea. The area also contains a large number of historic shipwrecks and is of great significance for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. For those areas in the Coral Sea considered particularly vulnerable to impacts from international shipping, 3 associated protective measures are proposed. These are a new area to be avoided and 2 supporting 5 nautical mile wide recommendatory two-way routes. The first route lies in Diamond Passage and is approximately 60 nautical miles long. It aims to separate opposing streams of traffic and aligns with the existing traffic pattern. The second two-way route lies west of Holmes Reef and is approximately 53 nautical miles long. The proposals seek to separate and formalise these well-established traffic patterns, while also keeping ships clear of the new area to be avoided. The proposed area to be avoided contains many reefs, keys, islets, sandbars, and shoal patches. Establishing areas to be avoided increases ship safety by keeping traffic away from the many navigational hazards within the area. This reduces the risk of groundings and allows more time for intervention in developing situations, such as a ship suffering a mechanical breakdown. Each year, approximately 430 ships traverse these waters while travelling to and from Australian ports, with many vessels already avoiding the area. The new two-way route off Holmes Reef will formalise current practices while adding only an extra 11 nautical miles to a ship's overall voyage. This represents a 0.3% increase to a typical voyage distance of 3,800 nautical miles between a Queensland port and Shanghai. The extension of the Great Barrier Reef and Torres Strait particularly sensitive sea area and the implementation of new associated protective measures provide a means of protecting the unique physical, ecological and heritage values of the Coral Sea, while having a minimal impact on international shipping. It demonstrates a commitment to sensitive marine environments while ensuring international shipping remains safe, viable and efficient.
So आप लोग break ले लो, break for you, right? So we'll continue with the law in the next class when we have. Okay then.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Right.
sir.
Right.